Walkie-talkies exploded in multiple parts of Lebanon today. At least 9 people are dead and hundreds are wounded in the second exploding device attack in the country in 2 days. A warning now that we're going to show you some of that shocking images of some of those explosions. This is social media footage of some of the pager explosions in Lebanon last night. The attacks appeared to be targeted towards Hezbollah members. 12 people were killed, including 2 children, and at least 2,800 injured, according to Lebanon's health ministry. Now, Lebanon blames Israel for the attacks, though Israel has not claimed responsibility. Matthew Levitt is a senior fellow and director of the Counterterrorism and Intelligence Program at the Washington Institute for Near East Policy, and he joins me now. Matthew Levitt, welcome back to the show.
Thanks for having me.
We've got exploding pagers, exploding walkie-talkies, a massive security breach for Hezbollah. How does something like this even happen?
Great to be back on the show. Well, something like this happens because Hezbollah gets worried that its operatives are getting killed in targeted attacks, and that this is because of cell phones. So there's a public call from Hassan Nasrallah, the head of Hezbollah, back in February. Get off your cell phones, stop doing the Israeli intelligence work for them, he said, and we'll give you pagers. The Israelis then, in something straight out of a Hollywood script that Hollywood would probably reject for being too fantastic, somehow penetrate Hezbollah's procurement channels and insert into the device itself grams of explosives, and then wait. Now, there are reports out that the Israelis planned only to use this in the event there was full-scale war to disrupt Hezbollah's communications ability in the context of a war, and that they only did it now because someone in Hezbollah got suspicious. The Israelis were afraid it was going to be exposed, and they decided to do it, use it before they lose it.
Right.
In the moment, I think the other reason the Israelis decided to use it instead of losing it, because that was still an option, was to indicate to Hezbollah that there will be increasing costs for continuing to shell northern Israel as they have for the past 11 months. It's a huge political, economic issue for Israel, with 60,000 persons displaced from their homes, and there doesn't seem to be an end in sight. And the Israelis want to indicate, in a way that is something short of war, and in a very tangible and targeted way, targeting only the Hezbollah militants who are senior enough to get one of these on their belt, that they mean business.
Okay, so the first tranche was the pagers, and now it appears to be walkie-talkies, handheld radios. Is it a similar thing? They somehow intercepted these alternative communication devices and also booby-trapped them to be detonated and exploded once they switched from the pagers? So what do we know there?
We know very little. But if you're Hezbollah, your understanding is that, yes, Hezbollah first got into the supply chain for your pagers. Now you understand they got into the supply chain for your handheld radios, and you have no idea what else they got into. So you are not feeling secure with any of your gear. You're not feeling secure with any of your communications. And this puts Hezbollah on a real back foot in terms of its ability to do things in any serious military coordinated way, which means even finding a way to respond to Israel for what was done is going to be complicated. They still can fire off a rocket here, a rocket there, but the ability to deal with the Israeli onslaught that will likely come in return is severely mitigated. And so Hezbollah is going to be in a very frustrated place. Expect Hassan Nasrallah, the Secretary General of Hezbollah, who's speaking tomorrow, to be a very, very angry man.
Right, so they probably don't want to go back to the cell phones because of the ability to track cell phone signal, and that perhaps being used to get some of the key people inside that organization. And now Plan B and seemingly Plan C have been wiped out, and at least serious doubt and concern injected into every other communication backup plan they may have. I mean, how do you even begin to recover from this operationally if you are Hassan Nasrallah and his people? What options do they turn to?
Very few.
Yeah.
David, I don't know if you have kids, but I've got a few, and
I got 2.
Try and keep them off their cell phones. You know what I mean? Like, you're not going to be able to keep your people from communicating at all. There's only so much you can do through human couriers and mouth to mouth. You certainly can't fight a war that way. So they are in a real pickle right now. It's not only tremendously embarrassing, it's not only a severe operational security failure, but this kind of neuters their ability to fight a war in the moment. And I think that there's a hope among people in senior Israeli positions that taking this off the table will maybe make Hezbollah find a face-saving way to accept the U.S. diplomatic effort led by Amos Hochstein to end the tensions in the north, to get Hezbollah to move its forces 10 kilometers from the border, which is still short of what they're supposed to do under UN Security Council Resolution 1701, all the way to the Litani, and bring this to a close. And if that doesn't happen, then you still could find the Israel-Lebanon border heating up still more, not in an Israel-Lebanon war, but in an Israel-Hezbollah war. Most Lebanese don't want this.
I know the argument, Matthew, has been that by targeting pagers and I guess the handheld radios that only belong to senior members of Hezbollah, it makes this a targeted strike. But these explosions didn't happen in just like a meeting of these Hezbollah people. They happened in public places. They happened in homes. 12 dead in the first round, 2,700 wounded is the number I've seen. There's a 9-year-old who was killed in this. There is a level of indiscriminate damage here by detonating these simultaneously in any number of places, right? I mean, what does that tell us about the nature of the approach Israel's prepared to take here, and the fallout this might have with people who may look at this and say this is not the way combat is supposed to be done?
I look at exactly the opposite. I mean, every single innocent that is injured or killed is a tragedy, full stop. But in war, that's going to happen. And so the goal is not to only do things that are absolutely guaranteed that no one but the actual bad guy is going to get it, because you can't fight that way. And certainly Hezbollah doesn't fight that way. By definition, it's been shooting indiscriminate rockets for 11 months. But to do this so that, you know, you don't go to Radio Shack in Lebanon and get this pager, right? This is a Hezbollah operational pager that goes only to the people who are really involved in things. By the way, it clearly we now know wasn't limited to Hezbollah. A member of the Yemeni Houthis went on social media, took a video of himself saying, "Mom, I'm okay, but my brother, your son, died. There are at least 40 of us here in Lebanon." We know that the Iranian ambassador, who apparently was doing something more than diplomatic work because he was carrying a Hezbollah operational pager, was also injured. Some of these went off in Syria. There are even reports that some might have gone off in Iraq. I think this was extremely targeted. And even when you do something extremely targeted, when you use the most sophisticated missile, you take the chance that the innocents are going to be killed. That's terrible. But if you are Israel and you're trying to stop Hezbollah from shooting rockets into your country for 11 plus months, this to me is extremely targeted and restrained, focused on the bad guys doing bad things. And hopefully they're not standing next to somebody else.
Yeah, look, the soldiers of the Iran-backed militias, this so-called axis of resistance. I understand the targeting of that, but you've watched how political pressure and public opinion has been a challenge for Israel because of civilian casualties in Gaza. There were civilian casualties in this. I appreciate the need for Israel's national security to deal with what Hezbollah has been doing. But is there not a political risk, just as a final point, in making this sort of a move that has this sort of a consequence in Lebanon now, in addition to what we've seen in Gaza and West Bank?
Look, I think people who are really concerned about the nature of the Israeli operations in Gaza need to look at this and say, well, this is what we kind of hoped might have happened in Gaza. But as you said, this is a kind of Hollywood thing. You can't do this all the time. The reality is in Lebanon, nobody but the hardest line people in Hezbollah want full-scale war. There are going to be a lot of people in Lebanon who are not unhappy with the fact that Hezbollah is being pushed back in a big way, and will appreciate the fact that if Israel has to do something, it's doing something that is as targeted as possible. There's never 100% targeting Hezbollah operatives. Right. I just want to go back and say, any child who is killed or injured, any civilians, tragedies, everyone, this whole situation for 11 plus months is a tragedy. And what we need to do is find a way to get it to a close. I think that's what this is about, finding a way to convince Hezbollah to stop firing rockets into Israel, as they've been doing for almost a year.
Matthew Levitt, Senior Fellow at the Washington Institute for Near East Policy. Thank you so much for your time again today, sir.
Thanks for having me. Always a pleasure.